I was on a coaching call the other day with a client and trying to go through the process of setting a goal with her. So in my practice, I usually try and set 2 goals so we can aim for those over the next 6 months. And these goals are specifically in the work that I'm doing around being more active. And this lady kept resisting, and I was having to do all sorts of verbal gymnastics and kind of changing tack, changing direction, really carefully wording my questions to try and guide her towards setting a goal. And whenever I tried to go into a specific example, she kept going off track onto why change is hard, onto all the barriers, onto the things that are going on in her life that are preventing her from making change, which is what we call sustain talk. But I kept at it because we know that when you set a goal, you're more likely to make the change that you're wanting to make. Neuroscience studies show that you're actually up to 10 times more likely to make the change when you set a specific, measurable, and achievable goal around the change that you're wanting to make. And I realized with this lady, and we eventually got there, and she eventually identified a specific focused goal that she can work on over the next few months. But I realized, I think for a lot of people, especially women, the word goal is a pretty loaded term, especially in this capitalist, hyper productivity focused culture. Trying to set a goal around something like your health or well-being can just feel a bit ugh. And I know I've talked to friends as well who just say, look, I don't set goals. The word gives me the heebie-jeebies. And so for this episode today, I'm going to talk about goal setting and why it's so important, what you should be doing when it comes to setting goals, and how to set goals and how to put them in place so that you can achieve them. And if the word goal gives you the heebie-jeebies, just replace the word goal with habit. So listen to this podcast today through the ears of what's a habit you're wanting to change. So I'm so excited to share this episode with you. You're going to learn in the next 30 minutes the 2 types of goals and which type of goal is actually better for long-term behavior change. You're going to learn my 6 M's framework when it comes to looking at what you should be doing or what goals you want to be setting around your health and well-being. I'll show you why the SMART principle for setting goals is actually a bit outdated and what we do now instead for health coaching. And I'll show you the only 2 indicators that I use to calibrate a goal to make sure my clients achieve their goals and make the change they want. So stick around, I'll be back in a moment. Goal setting is the bread and butter of what I do as a health coach, and I've often found that it's a bit of a challenge when it comes to setting goals with my clients. Some of the women I work with are ready straight away. They know exactly, yes, this is what I want to do and this is how I want to go about it. So for them, it's just maybe tweaking some strategies, maybe shifting, getting their motivation optimized. But for other clients, even identifying a goal can be quite confronting. And I think back to when I first had kids and I really let my health and well-being go by the wayside because I had these new priorities and I had it was really exciting time and a wonderful, beautiful time of purpose and connection. But I let my own health and well-being slide. And I realized after a few years, I'd actually just stopped setting goals for myself. And so I've always been quite goal focused and goal oriented. And I think for a lot of you, you might relate as well. We go through school, we've got these goals of, right, I want to get these marks at school. I want to, if you're playing sport or if you've been an athlete in the past, you have goals around the performance that you're wanting to do, around your fitness, maybe in competition as well. You have these external goals. But it can be hard when we grow up and leave school and into this weird world of adulthood to actually set goals that come from within. And these are goals that nobody else might know about. There's no trophies, there's no prizes for simply being a healthy, well and vibrant adult. But nevertheless, the idea of setting goals and having something that you're working towards is so important for your own health and well-being, physically and mentally. And we also know from neuroscience studies that if you set a specific goal, you are more likely to make a change compared with if you just say, look, I want to be healthier. And so a specific goal would be something around actually drilling into some numbers. So looking specifically at what you're wanting to do and how you're wanting to do it. But before we get into that, we'll talk a little bit more about why goal setting is important. So there are three main reasons why setting a goal is important. The number one thing that you get from it is accountability. And we all know that feeling of, oh, look, there's a change I want to make. Look, I really should be doing it. I should be off my phone. I should be getting up in the morning to exercise. I should be eating clean, whole foods. But when it comes to actually making that change, that should language it's not powerful. It's the lowest form of motivation. And we also know that having a vague idea of, look, I want to eat healthier is not specific enough to make that change. So when you set a specific goal and you have someone else hold you to account, and in particular, there's brain imaging studies that show that when you say your goal out loud, compared to if you just think it in your head, when you say it out loud, your frontal lobe actually has more activity in it. So what you're doing when you say your goal out loud to someone else, you're actually priming your brain for change, because those neural pathways are firing and wiring together to prime you to get ready to change your behaviour. The second reason why goal setting is really important for behaviour change is around motivation. So the idea of self-determination theory that a researcher called Albert Bandura came up with identifies that us humans have three basic needs, and these needs are autonomy. So do you have choice? Are you independent? And can you choose the actions and behaviours that you're taking? The second need we have is around relatedness. So are you connected? Do you feel seen and heard and validated? And then the third human need that we have is around competence. Do you feel like you can do the things that you're wanting to do? And especially with goal setting, setting a goal and then achieving it, and no matter how small. And that's actually why the work that I do with clients, I set really small achievable goals to start off with. So you get those small wins, because the endorphin hit and that feeling of pride and confidence in yourself from achieving something that you've set out to do is hugely motivating for sustaining that habit in the long term. The third reason why goal setting is important is around maintenance and monitoring. So if you're wanting to make a change, you want to create a new ruler, and on this ruler is the change that you're wanting to make. And so if you want to track how you're going, you want to be able to look back and go, yes, I've achieved that, I'm progressing towards my goal. Whereas if you set a vague goal like, look, I want to exercise more, it's kind of hard to measure. So goals give you that maintenance and that ability to monitor yourself in the long term. And so the story that I think of when it comes to the importance of setting a goal is in the research study that I'm doing at the moment with the University of Sydney. And we have two groups. So we have an intervention group that get coaching and support straight away. And then we have a control group. And these women have to go on a wait list to then get the program after a 6-month delay. But every woman gets the same goal setting call at the start of the study, and then they get divided, they get randomized into one of those two groups. And what's been really interesting is that when I do the follow-up calls and I'm asking the woman, look, how did you go with your goals? Were you able to make any changes? The number of women that have still been able to make a change based on that one goal-setting conversation they'd had 6 months ago, so many women have actually started making changes because of that initial goal-setting conversation that they had. And so I spoke with one lady who was literally doing nothing. She was, in her own words, a couch potato. She was burnt out, she worked in child protection, and she was really struggling with her physical health. She was 14 kilos overweight, and she was mentally in a hole. When she had that first goal-setting conversation with one of our health coaches at the start of the program, she was actually assigned to the control group. But here's the thing, she actually used that goal-setting conversation to really start making changes, because in that conversation we use a technique called motivational interviewing, and that really draws out your own motivation for change. So we're not telling you, I'm not going to tell you what to do and why it's important. My job is to have you understand and evoke that motivation and your reasons and your desire for change, because when it comes from within and when you say it out loud, you're so much more likely to make that change. And so for this woman, she had gone from being a couch potato, depressed and overweight, to when I spoke to her 6 months down the track, She had now worked her way up to running every second day. She was doing her local park run, which is 5Ks, which is no mean feat considering that at baseline, she was literally doing nothing. And she said to me, when she started running and she was shuffling, she said, I couldn't even run. It took her 1 minute to travel 100 meters, to the point where now she's doing a 5K park run in about 30 minutes. And so that really demonstrates the power of one single conversation using motivational interviewing to set goals. So now we'll talk about what are the types of goals you're setting. What do you want to be looking at when you're setting a goal around a change or a healthy habit that you're wanting to make in your life? And there are two types of goals. So there are outcome goals, which I think we're all used to. You know, we learn these at school, and maybe we have outcome goals at work as well around, you know, hitting certain targets. And an outcome goal around your health might be, I want to be able to run 5K, or I want to lose 5 kilos. They're outcome goals because there's a specific outcome attached to it. But the problem with outcome goals is that to some degree, you actually can't control the outcome. There's only one thing you can control, and that's the actions that you're taking. And so that leads to that second type of goals, which is a process goal. And the process goals are, what are the behaviors you're taking in your days, in your weeks? What are the actions you're doing to move you towards the thing that you want? And while having an outcome is really important. So, and it's often the starting point. You know, the outcome might be just a vision of yourself as healthier, fitter, stronger, feeling good about yourself. But the process to get there is really what matters. And so process goals, an example could be, look, I want to go for a walk 3 times a week, or I want to have 1 hour of social media per day, or I'm going to go to bed at 9:30 at night. You know, they're examples of process goals because they're really things that are in your control, and it's your choice and it's your behavior that will take you towards the change that you're wanting to make. The other thing that I come across in the work that I do with the women that I coach is that they might not be really sure what they're wanting to change. And so I use a framework called the 6 M's. And these are the 6 areas around your health and well-being that I think, and based on research as well, are the most important to look at. And so the first M is movement. So this is, what movement are you doing in your days, in your weeks? Are you walking? Are you swimming? What are the physical movements that you're wanting to do? And these can be linked to, so the physical activity guidelines for Australian adults are things like doing at least 30 minutes of aerobic exercise each day, doing 2 sessions of strengthening per week, and 2 sessions of functional or balance or flexibility training. And so they're the things that, they're the ideal targets. And for a lot of the women I coach, they're really quite far off. So I might drill those down and make them more achievable stepping stones at first. The second M is a mindful goal. So this might be something for your mind. And this might be something like, we probably all think of meditation or mindfulness or doing some yoga, and these are great goals to have. The other part of mindfulness is thinking of what nourishes your mind. And I know if you're like me, you probably really value learning. If you're watching this podcast today, I'd say you 100% value learning. So another goal to think of when it comes to that second M of being mindful is, what are you learning? What are you working towards? What are you stimulating your brain with? Because if you've been a high achiever and if you've been used to learning and growing, it can be hard as an adult to become self-directed. I know I always depended on, school, or when I was studying my uni degrees, of having an external thing. But when you kind of leave studying and enter the workforce, you can sometimes lose that passion or lose that drive for learning. And so having that come from within and linking it back to your values, so linking it to what's really important to you, having some kind of goal where you are learning and stimulating your brain that way can be really important. The third M is a mouthful, which I couldn't think of another word around your diet that starts with M. So if you can think of a better one, please do. But this is around nourishment. So what are your eating goals? What sort of habits are you wanting to create to nourish your body, to sustain you so that you can do the things you're wanting to do? And I think we all know how we should be eating, or the things that are best for our diet. So I won't go into those details, but might be the topic for another conversation. The fourth M is around money. And again, like the word goals, money can be a bit of a heebie-jeebie kind of difficult topic to bring up. But it's really important because I think the elephant in the room when it comes to women's health and wellness is your financial wellness. And I think it's really the foundation of your health and well-being, because if you don't have money, and I hear it in a lot of the women that I coach, that cost is such a barrier to exercising, to eating the way they want to eat. So if you don't have a foundation of financial well-being, then achieving other changes and optimizing your health and well-being can be really challenging. So I think setting some kind of goal around your financial well-being, what are your money behaviors? What discretionary spending are you cutting back on this week? And what are you investing in? You know, what money are you putting aside or looking to grow for your future? And I'll talk about wealth in another conversation because I think this warrants its own topic as well. But even just setting a simple goal around money, like just being mindful of how much you're spending, can be a really great starting point. The fifth goal is your muse. And this is something that I think often gets overlooked as well in our hyper-productive, outcome-focused culture, is what are you doing to nourish your creativity? And again, I know a lot of you might be thinking, oh, I'm not creative. Like, I definitely had that conversation. I went into a science degree, I did physiotherapy, and then I did a PhD. But what I'd realized was as a kid, I just loved daydreaming. You know, my mum would always tell me, oh, Jen, you're off with the fairies, because I'd be daydreaming. I'd be lost in my imaginary world of whatever book I was reading, or even imagining and dreaming about my future. And so I think for us women, having some time that you set aside to connect with your inner muse, to connect with that deep creativity. And when I say creativity, it doesn't have to be painting, you know, art brushes on the wall. Your creativity can simply be what's the life you're wanting to create. Because when you experience yourself as someone having the power to create the life that you want, then a whole world of power, empowerment, and possibilities opens up. So a muse goal would look like setting some time aside, maybe each day, maybe each week, to simply daydream and not even think about a creative output, but even just the creative process, that input of thinking through, letting your mind wander, daydreaming about how is my life now and what sort of future do I want to create for myself. The sixth M, the final M, is a me goal. And this is because I couldn't think of anything else that starts with M that is around just doing something that you enjoy, doing something that's pleasurable. You know, what are the hobbies that you're doing? What do you love doing? For me, I love doing puzzles, but I have such a guilty complex around doing it because it's so unproductive. You know, it's a waste of time, or so I told myself. But what I've realized is when I'm doing little things like doing a puzzle, I'm letting my mind wander and I'm actually usually coming up with ideas, and that often stimulates the creative process. That maybe I'll spend 15 minutes doing a puzzle, and in the meantime I'll rush off and find my notes app because I've thought of a few ideas for content or for my emails or for some stories as well. So having a goal around your me goal is literally doing something that's enjoyable or pleasurable. And yes, this can be around intimacy as well. So this can be intimacy with your partner or even with yourself, just doing something that's pleasurable. And so finally, we'll go into how do you set goals? And I'm sure if you've been in the corporate space or the health or sports space, you've heard of the idea of a SMART goal. And this is a goal that's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and it's got a time horizon on it. So an example of a SMART goal would be, I want to run for exercise for 30 minutes 3 times a week over the next 6 weeks. But what we've found is that setting a SMART goal is often not enough. So in my work, we've added 2 letters onto the end of SMART to make these goals not only smart, but smarter. And the E stands for enjoyable. So finding something you enjoy. You know, so many of the women I coach say, oh, look, I should be going to the gym because I know I should be doing strengthening. And I just say to them, look, is that something you enjoy? Are you going to want to do it? And they're like, oh, no. So finding something that you enjoy, because then behavior change becomes not only automatic and easy, but actually fun. So if you're enjoying something, you're way more likely to sustain it in the long term. Then the R stands for repeatable. Can you repeat it over time? And that definitely links to something that's enjoyable. And it also makes sure it's realistic as well. So look, can you do this thing multiple times? Or is it just going to be a one-off that's a novelty, kind of a flash in the pan? So you want to have a goal that's repeatable, that you can do over and over again to get you towards making the changes that you're wanting to make. Now, once I've set a goal with a client, I use 2 rulers to calibrate, is this goal something that they're going to achieve? The first thing I look at is their importance. So how important is this goal to you? And I use a measure of 1 to 10. So if 1 is, nah, not important at all, 10 is, yes, it's super important. How important is this goal to you? And if that number is less than a 7, then think about setting a different goal, because if it's not important to you, and this comes back to the idea of knowing your values, and that's why the work that I do, I always dig into eliciting a client's core values first, so that I know that if the goals they're setting are linked to those core values or if they're not, because your best results in life come from the things that you value the most. So your top 3 core values. And if your goal is linked to those, then you're way more likely to achieve that change rather than if that value is further down the list. Because your top core values are where you pour your energy and your effort and your time into as well. So if you set a goal, make sure it's important to you. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. And I saw a post on Instagram the other day from my good friend Carly, who runs a Try Mums business. And she rephrased it so that if you find yourself saying, I just don't have the time, switch that to, it's not important enough to me, and see how that feels. And if it feels uncomfortable, then it's something that is important to you, but you're making it further down your priority list. So it might be time to shift it up and let go of something else. The second thing that I look at to calibrate whether a goal is going to be realistic and achievable is how confident are you when it comes to achieving that goal. And the confidence, again, I put it on a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 is like, nah, not confident, and 10 is, yes, absolutely, I'm going to smash it. And again, I want that number to be a 7 or a higher, because if it's lower than a 7, if you're not confident you're going to do it, you're going to get really discouraged. And what we know about making behavior change is having these small wins at the start of the process. So in those first few weeks and months, you want to be setting a goal that you're then achieving, because that gives you that confidence boost to then sustain and keep maintaining that change over time. So if you set a goal for yourself, make sure that when you ask yourself, look, how confident am I? Can I do this? You want it to be a 7 out of 10 or higher. You want to be at least 70% confident. Then you're going to be way more likely to get that win that'll make you motivated to stick to the change that you're wanting to make. Then the last thing I do after I've set a goal with a client is just pause. And I invite you to do this now with me, and maybe close your eyes as well. Think about the goal that you've just set, or maybe you've got a goal that you're working towards. I want you to imagine that you've already achieved that goal. Imagine that you're eating healthy, you're exercising regularly, whatever your specific goal is. What do you think might change? Or how do you think your life would be different? And take a few moments to pause and really reflect on how would you feel. And the number one thing that just about literally every woman says when I ask them this is simply, I'll feel good about myself. And I think there's so much to that, because the underlying thing there is right now they're not feeling good about themselves. And also the power and motivation that comes from, hey, I said I was going to do something and I've done it. I've achieved my goal, no matter how small, is so powerful for getting you motivated and having you feel competent. Remember, competence is one of those core needs according to self-determination theory. So feeling like you can actually do the thing is so powerful for your long-term health and well-being. So the final thing I do once my client has set a goal and that we've worked out it's a smarter goal and it's important to them and they're confident they can achieve it, is simply to make a plan. And this is to look at in their weeks, when are they going to do the thing that they've said they're going to do? And for so many women, even having that light bulb moment of, wow, I could just schedule this in my diary. And I heard something on, I can't remember what the podcast was the other week, but it's around if you had a doctor's appointment for yourself, or if you had a lunch appointment with a friend, you would put that in your calendar. But when it comes to appointments for ourselves, we often don't take that step. So starting a new habit and making a change can literally be as simple as putting it in your calendar. If you keep old school calendars on the wall, which a lot of my clients in their 50s and 60s do, which I think is great, or put it in your phone calendar, which I should say a lot of them are also on their phones. So write it in your calendar as if it were an appointment, because when you see that alert come up, and maybe you set a reminder for yourself, when you see that come up, it becomes so much harder to ignore versus if you say to yourself, oh look, I'm going to go for a walk today at some point. So that's one of the biggest aha moments that my clients have is around simply scheduling it in their calendar as if it were an appointment, because it is. It's just an appointment with yourself, which when you think about it, what other appointment could be more important? Then I'll always spend a couple of minutes asking my clients, how will you track your progress? How will you monitor yourself? And in this amazing tech age, we've got all these wonderful gadgets that, can monitor our steps. We've got literally, if you've got a smartphone, whether it's an iPhone or an Android, you'll have an app in it that's actually tracking your steps, whether you know it or not. And a lot of my clients say, oh my God, I didn't even know that. So then I'll talk through, look, here's how to open up the app. Here's how to look at how many steps you're doing. And there's other really great health metrics in your phone app as well. Obviously, there's lots of smart watches as well. So Apple Watches, Garmin's, Fitbits. I'll always raise the topic because when I think back to some of the women that I've coached, a lot of them have said, oh, I don't use one now. They're not really for me. And I've just talked through, look, a lot of my clients find them really helpful. And then I can think of one lady whose husband bought her an Apple Watch for Christmas. And she was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to use this. But once she worked out that you can set your activity targets, and when you close those little circles, and Apple 100% know what they're doing in terms of getting that dopamine hit in your brain, she was just absolutely hooked to the point where she'd look at her watch, and if she hadn't quite closed her circle, she'd go outside and do some gardening or do a walk around the block. And the benefits she noticed for her physical health as well as her mental health, because again, it comes back to feeling competent, feeling like, yeah, I've really achieved something today that is so worth acknowledging. But I will add as well, your tracking doesn't have to be high tech. It can be as simple as writing it down in your journal if you journal, and I'm a huge fan of journaling. I'll do another episode on that at some point, or even writing it on your calendar. So for so many of my clients that have said, oh, look, I don't like smart watches or anything, and I don't carry my phone with me when I go for a walk, even just writing, and one of my ladies came up with the idea of just drawing a love heart in her diary each day that she was active, and she found it such a delight to look back through her journal and go, wow, I've got all these love hearts, look how active I've been. Because that recognition, that looking back, is so important for sustaining that behaviour change to look forward. And I think especially us women, we're so good at looking forward. We're so good at looking to, what do I want to achieve? Remember to look back as well and look at where you've come from and how far you've come. So thanks so much for joining. I've really enjoyed being with you here today. And thank you so much for taking the time. I really acknowledge you for having the determination and the courage to prioritize your health and well-being. And if you're setting a goal for yourself, I'd love to hear about it. And I'd also love to hear, what did you get out of today's episode? Because that'll help me calibrate what content I'm creating for the future. Also, if you found this episode helpful and you can think of one other loved one in your life who's maybe wanting to make a change, then share this link with them and help them understand how they can set goals to make the change they're wanting to make. If you have any questions, my email is jen@drjencartwright.com. Also check out my website, drjencartwright.com. You can download a free values-aligned goal-setting guide, and the link will be in the notes below. So make sure you jump on that, enter your email, and I'll send you the free guide straight to your inbox, and that'll guide you through the 3-step process that I use with my clients to set goals. So until next time, bye from me.